Single and SingleOrDefault are the next two element methods, which we will learn in this video. These two methods are powerful tools in your LINQ toolkit when working with sequences that contain only one element. Before we get started, remember that these methods differ from element at, first, and last methods, which work with sequences of any size. So, the difference between these two methods and the other 6 element methods is that we use both for sequences that contain only one element, but we use the other methods with sequences that contain one or more elements. But the result of all methods will be only one element. So, keep that in mind once you want to use single and SingleOrDefault methods. Let's get started. I will start with single method. This returns a single specific element of a sequence. This method has 2 overloads. The first one will be used in this way. It returns the only element of a sequence, and throws an exception if there is not exactly one element in the sequence. The second one will be used with 𝗬𝗏 expression. It returns the only element of a sequence that satisfies a specified condition, and throws an exception if more than one such element exists. Let's check the following example to understand both overloads. Suppose I have an integer array that contains the following numbers. I want to retrieve only the number which is greater than 5. For that I use the following query. So, the result of this query is the following sequence, which contains only this number. Now I will use single method after the query to return this single element. So, the output of this query will be this number. Suppose I have other numbers inside the array. Now this query will return the following sequence, which contains more than one element. Using single method after the query throws an invalid operation exception, because the sequence contains more than one element. So, in case we are using single method for a sequence that contains no elements or more than one element, an exception will be thrown. Let's now see how to use the second overload. I will add the following condition to return only the numbers that are greater than 7. Here is the output of the query before single method. This 𝗬𝗏 expression returns the following sequence that contains only one element. Using single method I will get this element as result. Suppose I have again other numbers inside the array. In this case, the query throws an exception, because we also have more than one element inside the sequence. So, no matter which overload is used, an exception will be thrown in case no elements or more than one element exist. I use the method after the query, but I can also use it inside the query with other clauses and methods, as I used the other element methods in the previous videos. That's all about single method. Let's now move on to the second method, SingleOrDefault. It returns a single specific element of a sequence, or a default value if that element is not found. Using this method we have 3 different scenarios. The first one is a sequence that contains only one element. Here the element will be retrieved. The second one is a sequence that contains more than one element. In this case, an invalid operation exception will be thrown. The third one is an empty sequence. In this case the default value will be retrieved. This is also the difference between single and SingleOrDefault. Single throws an exception in case the sequence is empty, while SingleOrDefault returns a default value. Let's now check the different overloads of SingleOrDefault method, which are 4 overloads. The first overload will be used with empty braces. It returns the only element of a sequence, or a default value if the sequence is empty. So, here the type's default value will be returned in case the sequence is empty. The second overload will be used with a default value inside the braces. It returns the only element of a sequence, or a specified default value if the sequence is empty. So, here the default value we added inside the braces will be returned in case the sequence is empty. The third overload will be used with a 𝗬𝗏 expression inside the braces. It returns the only element of a sequence that satisfies a specified condition, or a default value if no such element exists. So, here the type's default value will be returned in case the sequence is empty. The fourth overload will be used with a 𝗬𝗏 expression and a default value inside the braces. It returns the only element of a sequence that satisfies a specified condition, or a specified default value if no such element exists. So, here the default value we added inside the braces will be returned in case the sequence is empty. As before mentioned, in case the sequence contains more than one element, an exception will be thrown, no matter which overload is used. Let's now use the different overloads in real use cases to understand them better. Suppose I have the following string array that contains different names. And I have the following query to filter the array to get only the names that start with the letter G. As you can see, no name meets the condition, therefore the result of this query will be an empty sequence. Let's use the first overload of SingleOrDefault method after this query. Using this method, I will get an empty string, which is the default value of string type, because the sequence is empty. Let's now use the second overload with the following default value. The result here will be this string, what I added as default value. So, I got this string because the sequence is empty. Let's change the content of the array. Now the result of the query will be the following sequence, that contains only this element. Now using SingleOrDefault method I will get this element as result. So, I didn't get the default value, because the sequence contains one element. Let's now use the third overload of this method. I will set the following 𝗬𝗏 expression. The result of the query was the following sequence. The result of the 𝗬𝗏 expression will be also the same sequence. So, the end result of this query will be this name. Suppose I have now another condition. The result of this condition will be an empty sequence. And because the sequence is empty, I will get an empty string as result, which is the default value of string type. Let's now use the fourth overload of the method. Here I added a default value after the 𝗬𝗏 expression. As you know, the result of the query is the following sequence. And the result of the 𝗬𝗏 expression is an empty sequence. In this case, I will get this value as result, which is the default value I added. This is how each overload works. Remember, using single and SingleOrDefault an exception will be thrown, in case the sequence contains more than one element, no matter which overload is used. That's all about both methods. Let's summarize both methods before ending this video. On the left side I added all overloads of both methods. And here I added the three different scenarios. Let's see the output in each scenario for each overload. All overloads return the element found inside the sequence, in case the sequence contains only one element. All overloads throw an invalid operation exception, in case the sequence contains more than one element. Until now there is no difference between both methods. The difference comes first into play, when the sequence is empty. Both overloads of single method throw an exception. The first and third overloads of SingleOrDefault method return the type's default value. The second and fourth overloads of SingleOrDefault method return the added default value. The default value you add must be of the same data type of the sequence you want to query. For example, if you are using the method for a sequence of string, the default value must be also of type string. That's all about both methods for now.